The day the mediators walked AWA-wide the breaking point, the Galactic Assembly Hall floated in the darkness of space, like a jewel made of crystallized starlight. For 200 years, this massive station had served as the heart of galactic civilization. A place where 500 species came together to resolve their differences without war. Director Alina Vasca stood in the human observation gallery, watching the chaos unfold on the assembly floor below. Her reflection in the transparent aluminum showed a woman in her 50s, her dark hair streaked with gray. Wearing the simple blue uniform of the human diplomatic corps, she looked tired, and she had every right to be. The assembly floor was in an uproar. The Kryn Empire's representative, a towering being covered in luminescent scales that shifted from gold to crimson when agitated, was arguing with the Silvery Collective's ambassador, their voices translated by the systems that humans had designed and maintained for 2 centuries. Echoed through the chamber. At issue was the Resource Distribution Initiative, a proposal that would give the 12 eldest species in the galaxy exclusive rights to colonize any unclaimed star systems. The younger species would be relegated to whatever the elders deemed appropriate to share. Elena's deputy, Marcus Torres, stood beside her with his arms crossed. He was younger than Alina, barely 40, but his eyes held the weariness of someone who had seen this pattern repeat too many times. He gestured toward the assembly floor where representatives were shouting over each other. The translation systems were struggling to keep up with the overlapping voices. Not even pretending to listen to each other anymore, Marcus said quietly. Look at them. The Kryn won't yield an inch. The Sylvari are threatening to withdraw from trade agreements. The Verlaxian hives are talking about military action. Lena nodded slowly. She had watched this coming for years. Humanity had joined the Galactic Assembly 2 centuries ago as enthusiastic newcomers, eager to contribute to the grand experiment of interstellar cooperation. They had been naive enough to believe that other species shared their commitment to fairness and mutual benefit. That naivety had not lasted long. What humanity lacked in military power or ancient lineage, they made up for in versatility. Humans could breathe different atmospheres with the right equipment. They could eat a wider variety of foods than most species. Their brains were uniquely suited to learning multiple languages and understanding diverse perspectives. Most importantly, humans seemed to have an instinct for finding common ground between vastly different beings. Within 50 years, humans had become indispensable. They ran the translation systems that allowed 500 species to communicate. They designed the trade algorithms that kept goods flowing between thousands of worlds. They trained the doctors who could treat multiple alien biologies. They maintained the hyperspace beacons that made faster-than-light travel safe. They mediated the disputes that arose, constantly between species with fundamentally different values and needs. And they did it all with remarkable competence and very little recognition. The Resource Distribution Initiative was merely the latest example of how the elder species viewed humanity. The proposal had been drafted without any human input, despite the fact that human cartographers had mapped most of the unclaimed systems in question. The voting structure gave overwhelming power to species based on how long they had been spacefaring, which meant humanity's 200 years counted for almost nothing against civilizations that had traveled the stars for 10,000 years. When Alina had requested that the proposal be amended to give all species fair access to new territories, the Kryn ambassador had actually laughed. The sound had been like rocks grinding together, amplified through his translator unit. He had said something that Alina would never forget. Humanity serves a valuable function in our civilization. You are the oil that keeps the great machine running smoothly. But you do not help design the machine, and you certainly do not get to decide where it goes. Oil, that was how they saw humanity. A useful substance, certainly, but not something that deserved a voice in important decisions. Alina turned away from the window and walked to her office. Marcus followed without being asked. They had been working together for 15 years, and he knew her moods well enough to recognize when something significant was about to happen. Inside her office, Alina sat at her desk and pulled up a secure communication channel. The encryption was of human design, which meant it was virtually unbreakable by anyone else in the galaxy. Humanity had some advantages that the elder species did not appreciate. Are all the evacuation teams ready? Alina asked. Marcus checked his datapad. Every single one. We've been positioning them for the past 6 months, just as you ordered. The moment you give the word, we can begin pulling our people from every station. Embassy, medical facility, and administrative post in known space. And the Deadman protocols. Active and waiting. The moment our technicians are clear, every system we've built or maintain will lock down. They'll keep running for exactly 90 days, giving them time to find replacements. After that, everything shuts down permanently. Alina felt a weight settle on her chest. She had spent her entire adult life building bridges between species. The decision she was about to make would burn every single one of those bridges. But she could see no other choice. Humanity had tried patience. They had tried diplomacy. They had tried appealing to fairness and mutual benefit. None of it had worked. Send the signal, Alina said quietly. Activate Operation Exodus. Marcus hesitated for just a moment, then nodded and sent the encrypted command. Across the galaxy, thousands of humans received the message simultaneously. In hospitals, they finished their current procedures and then politely informed their colleagues they were resigning. In control centers, they completed their shifts and submitted formal notices of departure. In embassies and diplomatic posts, they began packing their belongings with efficient speed. Alina stood and straightened her uniform. She had one more duty to perform before she could leave this place forever. She walked back to the observation gallery, but this time she did not stop there. She continued down to the assembly floor itself, something she had done only a handful of times in her career. Humans were not voting members of the assembly. They were administrators, facilitators, and servants. They did not belong on the floor where the important species made their important decisions. The argument was still raging when Alina stepped onto the floor. Her presence was so unexpected that several representatives actually stopped speaking mid-sentence. The Kryn ambassador turned his massive head toward her, his scales shifting to a deeper red that indicated annoyance. Director Vasquez, this is highly irregular. The assembly floor is not for administrative staff during formal sessions. Alina smiled, and there was something in that expression that made a few of the nearer delegates lean back slightly. You are absolutely correct, Ambassador. I apologize for the intrusion. I merely came to deliver a brief message, and then I will leave you to your deliberations. She walked to the center of the floor where a small platform rose from the ground. It was traditionally used for formal declarations. Alina stepped onto it, and her image was immediately projected on screens throughout the massive chamber. 500 species, representing trillions of beings, could now see her clearly. Honored members of the Galactic Assembly, Alina began, her voice calm and professional. I come before you today to announce that humanity is formally withdrawing from all positions within galactic institutions, effective immediately. The chamber fell silent. Even the Kryn ambassador seemed too shocked to speak. Alina continued. For 200 years, humanity has served this assembly and the broader galactic community. We have maintained your communication networks, designed your trade systems, mediated your disputes, trained your medical personnel, and performed countless other essential functions. We did so believing that we were contributing to something greater than ourselves. We believed in the ideal of cooperation between species. She paused, letting her words sink in. Recent events have made it clear that the elder species of this galaxy do not view humanity as partners in this great endeavor. You view us as servants, as useful tools, as oil to keep your machine running smoothly. The Kryn ambassador found his voice. Director Vasquez, if this is about the resource distribution initiative, I am sure we can find some accommodation. This is not about one proposal, Ambassador. This is about a fundamental lack of respect. This is about 2 centuries of patient service rewarded with casual dismissal. This is about watching you divide the galaxy among yourselves while assuming humanity will continue to maintain the systems that make your civilization function. Lena pulled a small device from her pocket. It was a human-made data storage unit containing information that she had been compiling for years. I am transmitting to all of you a complete list of every system, facility, and function that humans currently operate or maintain. You will have 90 days to find replacements before these systems begin shutting down. I suggest you begin immediately. The Sylvari ambassador stood, her crystalline form refracting light in patterns that indicated distress. You cannot be serious. You would cripple galactic civilization over a political disagreement? I am completely serious, Elena replied. And humanity is not crippling anything. We built these systems, we maintained them, we've trained people to use them. Galactic civilization cannot function without us. That is not our failure. That is yours. She turned to leave, then stopped and looked back at the assembly. You taught us a valuable lesson today. You taught us that service without respect is just another form of slavery. You taught us that cooperation only matters when both parties benefit equally. You taught us that in this galaxy, only power commands respect. Thank you for that lesson. Humanity will not forget it. Elena walked off the floor and did not look back. Behind her, the assembly erupted into panic. Representatives were shouting at each other, at her retreating form, and into their communication devices. She could hear the Kryn ambassador demanding that human personnel be detained and forced to continue their work. She could hear others calling for military intervention. None of it mattered. By the time they organized any response, humanity would be gone. Marcus was waiting for her at the docking bay where a human transport ship was preparing for departure. Around them, other humans were boarding with calm efficiency. There was no panic, no chaos. This had been planned down to the smallest detail. All evacuation transports are underway, Marcus reported. We're pulling our people from every facility in the galaxy. Total personnel count is just over 3 million. Everyone should be clear within 72 hours. Lena nodded and boarded the transport. Through the viewports, she could see the Galactic Assembly Hall receding into the distance. It had been her home for decades. She had devoted her life to making that place work, to keeping the peace between species that would otherwise tear each other apart. Now, she was leaving it all behind. And she felt nothing but relief. The transport jumped to hyperspace, following routes that only humans fully understood. They were heading for rendezvous points scattered throughout the galaxy, where human ships were gathering for the journey home. Earth and her colonies were about to receive every human citizen who had been living abroad. It would be the largest migration in human history, as the stars streaked past in the viewports. Lena allowed herself to wonder what would happen next. The galaxy had taken humanity's service for granted for so long. What would they do when that service was suddenly withdrawn? How long would it take for them to realize just how much they had depended on the species they had dismissed as mere servants? 3 months, Elena thought. The Deadman protocols would keep critical systems running for 3 months. After that, the elder species would be on their own. She settled into her seat and closed her eyes. For the first time in years, she felt like she could finally rest. The burden of holding galactic civilization together was no longer her responsibility. Let them figure it out themselves. The silent, collapsed commander, James Okonkwo, stood on the observation deck of Nexus Station and watched his people work with practiced efficiency. Nexus was one of the largest structures ever built. A massive ring-shaped station that orbited a neutron star at the intersection of 12 major trade routes. For 150 years, Nexus had served as the galaxy's primary commercial hub. Thousands of ships passed through daily, carrying goods between hundreds of worlds. James had been station administrator for 10 years. He knew every corridor, every system, every quirk of the aging infrastructure. He also knew that within hours, Nexus was going to become a very dangerous place to be. His team was conducting the final evacuation of human personnel, and they were doing it under increasingly hostile circumstances. A Vorlaxian security officer approached him, her insectoid features showing clear agitation. The Vorlaxians were a hive species, and this officer was clearly receiving instructions from her queen mind. Commander Okonkwo, I have orders to detain all human personnel. You cannot be allowed to leave. James turned to face her calmly. He was a large man, over 2 meters tall, with the kind of presence that came from years of leadership experience. Officer Kilvex, I respect you and your dedication to duty. But I need you to think very carefully about your next action. My people are leaving. You can either let us go peacefully, or you can try to stop us by force. I strongly recommend the first option. The officer's mandibles clicked nervously. A queen commands it, The humans must remain. The Queen is making a mistake, James said quietly. In approximately 6 hours, the main reactor control systems for this station are going to lock down. The backup systems will fail 3 hours after that. Without human technicians to prevent it, Nexus Station will experience a catastrophic power failure. Everyone on board will die, including you. Kilvex's compound eyes widened. You're lying. You would not sabotage a station where millions of beings live. I am not lying, and we did not sabotage anything. We simply built systems that require constant maintenance and oversight. Systems that only humans fully understand how to operate. Your queen assumed we would always be here to keep things running. She was wrong. James pulled out a datapad and showed her a schematic of the station's power systems. Look at this. The reactor uses a quantum containment field that requires recalibration every 8 hours. The recalibration is performed by an artificial intelligence that only responds to human operators. When the last human technician leaves this station, that AI will lock down permanently. Without it, the containment field will destabilize. The Vorlaxian officer stared at the schematic with growing horror. But there must be a way to override it. Your emergency protocols. There are emergency protocols, James agreed. Unfortunately, they were all designed by humans, protected by encryption. That only humans can break, and documented in technical manuals written in languages that take years to learn properly. You could spend the next decade trying to figure it out. You have about 9 hours. He watched the realization dawn in her eyes. The Vorlaxians were not stupid. They were excellent organizers and managers. But their technology had always been inferior to humanity's, and they had gladly accepted human help in upgrading their systems. Now that help was being withdrawn, and they were discovering just how dependent they had become. What do you want? Kilvex asked quietly. I want you to let my people leave in peace. Once we are clear, I will transmit the override codes to your queen. She will have enough time to shut down the station safely and evacuate everyone aboard. But only if you let us go right now. The officer hesitated, her antennae twitching as she consulted with her hive mind. Finally, she stepped aside. Go. But know that the galaxy will not forget this. Good, James said. We are counting on that. He led his team to the docking bay where the last human transport was waiting. Behind them, they could already hear alarms starting to sound as various systems began to report anomalies. The Deadman protocols were activating right on schedule. James had not lied to the Vorlaxian officer. Nexus Station was going to fail. Only question was whether they would evacuate in time, as their ship undocked and pulled away from the massive station. James pulled up a secure channel to Earth. The communication would take hours to arrive due to the vast distances involved. But he sent his report anyway. Nexus evacuation complete. Final human personnel clear. Systems entering lockdown phase. Estimate total station failure in 12 hours. Recommend all shipping avoid this route for the foreseeable future. He closed the channel and sat back, watching Nexus Station recede into the distance. Lights were flickering across its vast surface as one system after another began to fail. Ships were undocking in a panic, fleeing before the station's death throes could catch them. It was chaos, and it was only beginning. Across the galaxy, similar scenes were playing out. On the medical station Sanctuary Prime, Dr. Sarah Okafor supervised the evacuation of the last human medical personnel. The station's director, a Sylvari physician named Crystalline Thought, confronted her in the corridor. Dr. Okafor, you cannot leave. We have thousands of patients. Multiple species that only human doctors know how to treat properly. Sarah kept walking, her medical team following behind her. She was in her late 30s, with warm brown skin and kind eyes that had seen far too much suffering. Then I suggest you find new doctors very quickly. I have provided you with complete medical databases and treatment protocols. Everything. You need to continue caring for your patients is in those files. But we do not understand human medical notation. Your diagnostic systems use algorithms we cannot decipher. Your surgical techniques require training we do not have. Sarah stopped and turned to face him. You had 200 years to learn. You chose not to because it was easier to let humans handle the difficult cases. That was your choice. Now you will live with the consequences. Crystalline Thought's body flickered with patterns that indicated deep distress. The Sylvari communicated as much through light patterns as through words. People will die because of your actions. People die every day, Sarah replied quietly. I have spent 15 years on this station working 18-hour shifts, treating species whose biology I had to learn from scratch. I did it because I believed in the mission. I believed we were all working together to build something better. She gestured around the station. But you never saw me as a colleague. You saw me as a useful tool. When humans requested better facilities, better equipment, better support, you told us we should be grateful for the opportunity to serve. Well, we are no longer grateful, and we are no longer serving. She left crystalline thought standing in the corridor and continued to the docking bay. As her ship departed, she could see the medical station's lights starting to dim. The environmental systems were beginning to fail without human maintenance. They would need to evacuate soon if they wanted to survive. On Earth, the returning humans were being greeted as heroes. The planet's population had swollen by 3 million virtually overnight. And emergency housing was being constructed at a frantic pace. But there was no panic. Humanity had been preparing for this moment for longer than anyone realized, in a secure facility deep beneath the Alps. Admiral Chenwei stood in a command center that looked nothing like any military installation in known space. The walls were lined with displays showing hundreds of projects scattered across the outer reaches of the galaxy. Construction yards, mining operations, research stations, all hidden in the void between spiral arms, far from any traveled space lanes. Report, Chenwei ordered. She was a woman in her 60s, with short gray hair and eyes that missed nothing. She had spent the last 30 years preparing for this moment. Her chief of operations, Colonel Marcus Rodriguez, pulled up a holographic display. All Phase 1 objectives complete. Every human citizen has been extracted from galactic space. The Deadman protocols are activating on schedule. Estimates suggest major system failures will begin within the week. And our own projects? The Titan shipyards have completed the first wave of vessels. 50 heavy cruisers, each one equipped with technology the elder species have never seen. We are beginning construction on the second wave. Total estimated completion time for the full fleet is 8 months. Chenwei nodded slowly. And the Exodus fleet? Assembling at Rally Point Omega? 3,000 transport ships carrying our entire civilian population to the new colonies. They will depart once we confirm the perimeter defenses are operational. She studied the displays for a long moment. What they were doing was unprecedented in human history. Humanity was not just withdrawing from the galaxy. They were disappearing completely, vanishing into the darkness beyond known space. And while they were gone, they were building something the elder species would never expect. For 2 centuries, humanity had been learning. They had studied every species they encountered, analyzed every technology, understood every weakness. The elder species had assumed humans were just naturally good at administration and mediation. They had never considered that humanity might be quietly preparing for the day when cooperation failed. Chenwei turned to her communications officer. Any response from the Galactic Assembly? Multiple attempts to contact Earth, all ignored. The Kryn Empire has threatened military action if we do not return their systems to operational status. The Sylvari Collective has offered to renegotiate the Resource Distribution Initiative. The Vorlaxian hives are demanding we send technicians back immediately. In our response, silence is ordered. Chenwei smiled slightly. Good. Let them make demands into the void. They will learn soon enough that humanity does not respond to threats or empty promises. We gave them 200 years of our best efforts. They threw it away. Now they can discover what the galaxy looks like without us. In orbit around Jupiter, the last major gathering of human ships was taking place. Transport vessels from across the galaxy were arriving at predetermined coordinates, carrying millions of evacuees and everything they could salvage. The Exodus fleet was the largest collection of human ships ever assembled, and it was preparing for a journey into unmapped space. Director Elena Vasquez stood on the bridge of the flagship, watching the endless stream of ships arrive. Beside her, Marcus Torres was coordinating the complex logistics of moving an entire civilization. We are going to be okay, Marcus said quietly. The elder species cannot follow us where we are going. By the time they realize what we have built, it will be too late for them to stop us." Lena nodded, but her expression remained troubled. "I keep thinking about all the people we left behind. All those species who depended on us. Good people who had nothing to do with the Assembly's decisions. They made their choice when they remained silent," Marcus replied. "Every time the Kryn or the Vorlaxians treated us as servants, every time our requests for fair representation were ignored, those good people said nothing. Silence is complicity. But I wonder if we will become what we despise. If we will become the very thing we tried to prevent." Marcus was quiet for a moment. "That is a risk we will have to manage. But right now, we need to focus on survival. The elder species have made their position clear. Humanity is welcome to serve, but not to lead. We can be useful, but we cannot be equal. I refuse to accept that future for our children." Lena turned away from the viewport and walked to the command chair. She sat down heavily, feeling the weight of decisions made and choices that could not be undone. Begin the final departure sequence. Take us to Rally Point Omega. It is time to show the galaxy what humanity can accomplish when we are not holding ourselves back. The Exodus fleet turned as one and jumped into hyperspace, following coordinates that no other species knew existed. Behind them, the lights of human civilization in galactic space were going dark one by one. Stations were failing. Ships were stranded. Trade routes were collapsing. Medical facilities were shutting down. Communication networks were dissolving into chaos. The galaxy was learning a lesson that humanity had tried to teach them peacefully for 2 centuries. Cooperation was not weakness. Interdependence was not slavery. And the quiet competence of those who kept civilization running should never be taken for granted. The elder species had dismissed humanity as mere servants. Now they were discovering what happened when the servants stopped serving. And in the darkness beyond known space, humanity was preparing to return as something very different from what they had been before. The New Order won. Year had passed since humanity withdrew from galactic civilization, and the results were catastrophic beyond anyone's predictions. The Kryn Empire, once the most powerful force in known space, was on the brink of collapse. Their vast fleets sat idle in orbit around their homeworld because without human-maintained hyperspace beacons, a faster-than-light travel had become too dangerous to attempt. Ships that tried to make the journey anyway often vanished without a trace. Lost in the depths of hyperspace when their navigation systems failed, Ambassador Thelcross of the Kryn stood in what remained of the Galactic Assembly Hall and surveyed the ruins of galactic civilization. The hall itself was barely functional. Life support operated at minimal levels. The translation systems worked only intermittently. Half the member species had stopped sending representatives because they could no longer afford the journey. The grand experiment of interstellar cooperation was dying, and everyone knew who was to blame. "We must contact the humans," Thelcross said, his luminescent scales now permanently pale with stress. "We must negotiate their return." The Sylvari ambassador, Crystalline thought, flickered with patterns of despair. "We have been trying for a year. They do not respond to our messages. Long-range scans show that Earth and all human colonies are surrounded by some kind of energy barrier. Our ships cannot penetrate it. Our communications cannot reach them. It is as if humanity has vanished from the galaxy entirely." Then we send a delegation. A peace mission. We offer them whatever they want. "And how do you propose we get there?" asked the Vorlaxian Queen representative. "Our ships cannot safely travel more than a few light years. Earth is hundreds of light years from here. We would need to make dozens of hyperspace jumps, each one risking catastrophic failure." Thelcross slammed his massive fist on the table, creating a sound like thunder. "Then we find another way. We rebuild the systems ourselves. We cannot simply sit here and watch our civilization crumble." But rebuilding was proving impossible. The technology humanity had designed was far more sophisticated than anyone had realized. Systems that had seemed simple when humans maintained them turned out to be incredibly complex. Artificial intelligences that had operated seamlessly for decades refused to respond to non-human operators, critical infrastructure that had never required. Thought was now failing faster than it could be repaired. The medical situation was perhaps the worst. Without human doctors and human diagnostic systems, species that had once received cutting-edge medical care were now dying from treatable conditions. Sanctuary Prime, the galaxy's premier medical station, had been forced to shut down completely after its environmental systems failed. Thousands of patients had been evacuated, but hundreds had died in the chaos. Trade had collapsed to levels not seen in millennia. The complex algorithms that had balanced supply and demand across thousands of worlds were gone. What remained were primitive barter systems and localized economies. Worlds that had specialized in producing specific goods found themselves unable to trade. Those goods for the food and resources they needed to survive. Famine was spreading. In the Vorlaxian hive worlds, the situation had become critical. Their entire civilization was based on collective consciousness coordinated through technology that humans had helped design. Without the psychic stabilizers and network management systems that human specialists had maintained, the hive minds were fragmenting. Queens were losing contact with their workers. Entire colonies were descending into chaos as the careful balance of their society collapsed. Queen Velserith stood in her throne chamber, feeling the minds of billions pressing against her consciousness. But where once that pressure had been organized and purposeful, it was now becoming chaotic and desperate. Her people were starving because the agricultural systems no longer functioned properly. They were dying because medical care had become primitive. They were losing their very identity as their hive minds slowly disintegrated. "Send every ship we can spare," she commanded. "Find the humans. Bring them back. Offer them anything they ask. The survival of our species depends on it." But the ships she sent joined dozens of others from different species, all searching desperately for any sign of human presence. They found nothing. It was as if humanity had erased itself from the galaxy. What the searching species did not know was that humanity was closer than they imagined. Hidden in the vast emptiness between spiral arms, protected by technology that made them invisible to conventional sensors. The human Exodus fleet had arrived at their destination. Rally Point Omega was not a single location, but rather a network of hundreds of facilities scattered across a volume of space larger than most empires. Dr. Sarah Okafor stood in the observation Deca Medical Station Alpha and looked out at the construction happening all around her. Massive shipyards were assembling vessels of a design that would have been unthinkable a year ago. Research stations were developing technologies that pushed the boundaries of known physics. Agricultural platforms were producing enough food to feed the entire human population several times over. "It is remarkable what we accomplished in just 1 year," her colleague Dr. James Chen said beside her. "When we were serving the galactic community, we were always constrained by their expectations, their limitations, their politics. Now, free from those constraints, we have achieved more than we did in the previous 50 years. Sarah nodded, but her expression was troubled. "I keep thinking about the patients I left behind. Good people who needed care that only I could provide. They are probably dead now." "They were not your responsibility," James replied. "You gave them 15 years of your life. You trained their doctors. You provided them with detailed protocols and databases. If they chose not to learn, if they preferred to keep you as a convenient servant rather than truly understand what you were teaching them, that failure is theirs, not yours. Perhaps, but it still feels wrong. We had the power to help, and we chose not to." James turned to face her directly. "Sarah, we did not choose this. They did. They chose to treat us as servants rather than partners. They chose to restrict our growth while depending on our labor. They chose to dismiss our concerns while taking our contributions for granted. We gave them every opportunity to change, and they refused. What happened next is the natural consequence of their decisions." Before Sarah could respond, an announcement echoed through the station. "All senior personnel report to Command Center 1. Admiral Chen Wei is calling a general assembly." The command center was enormous, designed to coordinate operations across hundreds of facilities simultaneously. When Sarah and James arrived, they found it already filling with department heads. Ship commanders, research directors, and civilian leaders. The entire leadership structure of humanity's exodus was gathering in one place. Admiral Chen Wei stood at the center of the room, her presence commanding immediate attention. Beside her was Director Elena Vasquez, the woman who had made the decision to pull humanity out of galactic civilization. Together, they represented both the military and civilian leadership of humanity's new direction. "Thank you all for coming," Elena began. "I know many of you have questions about our next steps. Today, we are going to provide answers." She activated a holographic display that showed the current state of the galaxy. Red zones indicated areas of complete system failure. Yellow zones showed regions experiencing severe problems. Green zones, once covering most of known space, had shrunk to tiny pockets around a few core worlds. The galactic civilization that had existed for millennia was visibly collapsing. This is what happens when a civilization becomes dependent on a single species for critical functions, Elena continued. The elder species believed they were strong because they had ancient lineages and powerful militaries. They did not realize that strength also comes from knowledge, from competence, from the ability to maintain complex systems. They took our labor for granted, and now they are paying the price. Admiral Chen Wei stepped forward. "For the past year, we have been monitoring communications throughout the galaxy. Multiple species have attempted to contact us. They are offering negotiations, concessions, even full membership in the Assembly with voting rights equal to the Kryn. They are desperate. Are we going to respond?" someone asked from the crowd. "Yes," Chen Wei replied, "but not in the way they expect." She activated another display, this one showing massive ships, unlike anything in galactic history. They were enormous vessels, each one the size of a small moon, bristling with weapons and defenses that incorporated technologies humanity had only recently developed. While the galaxy was struggling to keep the lights on, "We were building this," Chen Wei explained. "The Titan-class warships represent the culmination of everything humanity learned during our 2 centuries in galactic service. We studied every species we encountered. We analyzed every technology. We identified every weakness. These ships are designed to fight and win against any force the elder species can assemble." A shocked silence filled the command center. Sarah felt her stomach tighten. "You are planning to invade?" "No," Elena said firmly. "We are planning to offer them a choice." She pulled up another display, this one showing detailed administrative plans. Humanity is going to return to galactic civilization, but not as servants, not as mediators. We are going to return as administrators. We will restore the systems that keep civilization functioning. We will repair the trade networks. We will resume medical services. We will make hyperspace travel safe again. And in exchange, someone asked. "In exchange, we take control," Chen Wei stated flatly. "Every species that accepts our help will place their worlds under human administration. They will retain local autonomy for cultural matters, but all strategic decisions, all resource allocation, all military command will be under human authority. We will run the galaxy the way it should have been run from the beginning, with competence and fairness rather than political theater and ancient privilege." The room erupted in arguments. Some people supported the plan enthusiastically. Others were horrified by what they saw as humanity becoming the very thing they had opposed. Sarah found herself torn between both reactions. "This is not what we stood for," one civilian leader argued. "We left because we believed in cooperation, in partnership. Now you are proposing conquest." "I am proposing survival," Chen Wei replied coldly. "The galaxy has proven that it cannot govern itself. Left to their own devices, the elder species will tear themselves apart and take countless innocent lives with them. We have the power to prevent that. We have the responsibility to prevent that." Lena raised her hand for silence. "I understand your concerns. Believe me, I share many of them. But consider the alternative. If we do nothing, billions will die. Entire species will go extinct. The greatest experiment in interstellar cooperation in galactic history will end in complete failure. Is that what you want? But taking control by force, making them submit to our authority, how is that better?" Sarah heard herself asking. Alina Metarized directly. Because we will actually take care of them. We will not exploit them. We will not favor some species over others. We will build a system that works for everyone, not just the powerful. Yes, it means they lose their independence, but they will gain security, prosperity, and fairness. For many species, especially the younger ones that the elder species have oppressed for millennia, that will be a significant improvement. And those who refuse our help, James asked, "It'll be left alone," Chenwei replied. "We will not force anyone, but we will also not allow them to threaten the species that do accept our protection. Any world that chooses to remain independent will be isolated. No trade, no communication, no access to the networks we rebuild. They will be on their own, just as they claimed they wanted to be." The debate continued for hours, but ultimately the decision had already been made. The fleet was built. The plans were laid. Humanity was returning to the galaxy and everything was about to change.